Alt står som i går også, ikke sant? Jeg skal bare sjekke lyden, hvordan lyden min er og sånt, men jeg bare tenkte det er greit å bare gjøre det herfra. Skal vi se?
Det blir jo samme i dag, at du alltid står inne, for nå har vi de introduksjonen av dem til å bytte.
Nemlig, ikke sant? Skal vi se.
Skal du slippe å gå rundt studio også?
Ja.
Bare gå ned på siden.
Der, så. Welcome to the Oslo Act for Nature Global Online Forum. My name is Birgit Marie Lioden, founder of the Ocean Opportunity Lab. I will be your host throughout the day and take you through the program for this town hall live from our studio here in Oslo. And today we will look into connecting people and nature, transforming the global food system. Det fin lyd? Ja, men så bra. Welcome to the Oslo Act for Nature Global Online Forum. My name is Birgit Marie Lioden, founder of the Ocean Opportunity Lab. I will be your host throughout the day and take you through the program for this town hall live from our studio here in Oslo. Today we will deep dive into how our world's food system needs to be transformed for people, for the environment, and for our shared future. Even before the onset of the COVID-19 pandemic, the evidence for transformation had never been clearer. We need to build food regenerative systems that restore and strengthen our biospheres, rather than degrade land, soils, and biodiversity. Our task is critical. We need to provide an affordable and healthy diet to a population estimated to reach 10 billion people by 2050 without destroying future livelihood. For those who attended yesterday, this session is also an interactive one. You will get to participate in several polls to voice your opinions, and we encourage you to submit questions throughout the sessions to the experts. Our first poll is related to how food system transformation is on the agenda in your region or community. The second poll, in your community or region, what's the most important step that can be taken to strengthen the role of nature in ensuring food security? And the third, how are you committed to take action to transform the food systems? To introduce today's town hall and guide us through an amazing span of engaged experts and dedicated change makers, I will now hand the digital stage over to our Nairobi studio and our moderator, James Lomax, Food Systems and Agriculture Advisor at the UN Environment Programme. Welcome.
Thank you so much, Birgit. Welcome to Town Hall 4 for Act for Nature Global Online Forum. This Town Hall 4 is called Connecting People and Nature, Transforming the Global Food System. And this really is, for me, setting the scene about why we have to take food systems and agriculture seriously, why we have to bring nature in centrally to this transformation, and really ensuring that for UNEA, for the United Nations Environment Assembly, which is going to be in February next year, that this very much comes up and is on the top of the agenda for member states during that. Now, I was planning to talk about why we are here, but of course, that's what the panel is for, that's what the speakers are for. So please, let me introduce the agenda. Please feel free to interact with the poll. Please give your questions, write them in the chat, and we'll see how we can interact with the panelists as we go. So first of all, we're going to talk to Minister Dag Inge Ulstein, who is the Minister of Development for Norway. Hopefully he will talk about the steps that Norway is taking in taking a food systems approach in their work. Then we're going to have a minister from Lord Zach Goldsmith, who is going to talk about the importance of a just rural transition and why why it's so important for the UK. Then we're going to have really the science from Per Fredrik Faro, who is the lead author of the Food and Land Use Coalition report, followed by then a dear friend of mine, Agnes Kalibata, who until recently was the president of the Alliance for Green Revolution in Africa and has now taken on the mantle of the UN Special Envoy for the UN Food Systems Summit, which is going to happen sometime late next year. Then we're going to give the floor to Gerda Verburg, who runs the Scaling Up Nutrition movement, which is very much looking at the nutrition side of food systems. then to Sunny Verghese, who is the CEO of Olam, who will very much give the business side, and someone who's been instrumental in supporting the work that we have been doing at UNEP, specifically on sustainable rice. And then Gunhild Stordalen, who is the founder and chair of EAT Foundation. Then we're going to have a bit of a break. We're going to find out about the polls, what's been talking, what is the chat online. And then we're going to go into a panel which is much more interactive. And that panel is going to be, first of all, João Campari, who is the head of the global practice for food for WWF, Diane Holdorf, who's the managing director of Food and Nature at the World Business Council for Sustainable Development, then Felipe Villela, who runs a startup about regenerative agriculture, followed then by Immaculate Daisy, who has some really good, really sort of nuggety, granular experiences of really creating food systems transformation on the ground. So that's where we are. Please interact with the chat, and please feel free to ask questions for the panel later. And let's make sure that we get the science right and we get the momentum flowing through the town hall so that we can hit UNEA running and therefore onto all the other things that are coming up, like the Biodiversity COP and the Food Systems Summit. So without further ado, I would like now to introduce our first speaker. I'm very pleased to have Minister, His Excellency Dag Inge Ulstein, I hope I've said it right, who's the Minister of International Development from Norway, to really, hopefully, if you can, give a little bit of a background about why this subject is important to the Norwegian government. And maybe you could talk a little bit also about the food systems strategy that you have in place that was signed in December last year. Floor is yours, Oslo. Thank you.
Thank you, James. You said it perfectly. So, dear friends, the coronavirus is changing the world, but it's not turning everything upside down. It does not alter our commitment to ending hunger within this decade and reaching the other sustainable development goals, even though we know it will be more difficult. The pandemic has many consequences, and we are still not seeing the end of it. COVID-19 is increasing food insecurity. More than 820 million people do not have enough to eat. The number of people facing crisis levels of hunger may soon be doubled. For the first time in 30 years, poverty is on the rise. 300,000 people may die out of hunger every day for the next 3 months. 300,000 every day. We cannot accept this. Norway quickly increased support to key actors and important initiatives responding to the coronavirus outbreak. Already in March, Norway took the initiative to a UN multi-partner trust fund to assist countries in responding to the crisis and mitigating its socio-economic impacts. It is up and running, disbursing funds to projects. Together, we must prevent this health crisis from becoming a hunger crisis. A year ago, Norway launched an action plan on sustainable food systems. The implementation of this plan has now become even more urgent. The action plan changes the way we think about, produce, and distribute food. It introduces a more holistic approach. It places the food value chain in a broader food system. In a food system, the value chain is linked to factors such as climate, the environment, infrastructure, and institutions. Norway supports more than 50 different projects and programs to improve food systems and food security. These are focusing on 4 key components on sustainable food systems: food production, value creation and markets, nutrition and diet, and policy and governance. These areas are connected to one another in many ways. Our main challenge is to find the best way to use these interconnections to optimize the efficiency and sustainability of food systems. None of the challenges we were facing before the outbreak have become less urgent. Poverty and climate change remains our most dramatic challenges. These two challenges are closely linked, as said. Climate change poses enormous problems for development. Emission reduction will not provide any immediate help to the poorest people. One of the three main aims to the Paris Agreement is to increase the ability to adapt to the adverse impacts of climate change in a way that does not threaten food production. In support of this, the Norwegian government is launching a strategy to significantly step up assistance to the countries most at risk to help make them more resilient to climate change and climate-related disasters. The main goal of the strategy, which will be introduced before the autumn, is to fight hunger. Norway will strengthen development cooperation with the countries hit the hardest by climate change. And the objective is to support policies and measures directed towards the most vulnerable communities and individuals within these countries. Because ensuring that no one is left behind is at the core of the SDGs. Our strategy will therefore target food systems in sub-Saharan Africa in particular. We will also focus on small island development states, which experience wide-ranging impacts from extreme weather events and rising sea levels due to climate change. Areas we wish to strengthen through our strategy includes introducing climate-adapted measures for food production and food systems. There is a need to provide poor small-scale farmers and fishermen with better knowledge, technology, and access to early weather and climate forecast. Increasing the implementation of nature-based solutions to make communities more climate resilient. And thirdly, strengthening infrastructure and the ability to build back better after natural disasters. What is needed more? What we need the most right now is action. Action to combat hunger and to establish long-term food security. The process of implementing our action plan on food system is underway, and I'm really hoping for a good result. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Minister. That was very inspiring. And just from a personal point of view, I'd very much like to thank the Norwegian government for not only putting the effort into this forum and specifically into this town hall, but also as somebody, as a professional who's been working out how a food systems approach works in practice, it's been an extremely inspiring process to actually then review and to see how the Norwegian strategy works. So well done. We look forward to working with Norway in the future. I think we can do a lot going forward. So thank you very much for your intervention. Okay, so we were planning as a follow-on from that to have a UK minister, so Lord Zach Goldsmith. Unfortunately, he couldn't make it. So we are instead looking at a video. He has kindly prepared a video. So this video is from the Right Honourable Lord Goldsmith of Richmond Park, Ministry of State at the Foreign and Commonwealth Office, Department for International Development and Department for Environment, Food and Rural Affairs. As I said, unfortunately, he can't be here, but he wanted to take part in person, of course, but really to make the case for the fact that UNEA is going to be such a critical stepping stone towards achieving the SDGs when it comes to food and agriculture, and also moving into the Food Systems Summit. So please run the video. Thank you.
UNEP plays a vital role in the global effort to halt environmental degradation. The UN Environment Assembly in February 2021 will set the world on a critical year of action. The UN Food Systems Summit, CBD COP15, and UNFCCC COP26 provide an unprecedented opportunity to galvanize action around the challenge of feeding 9 billion people by 2030 while protecting and restoring the natural world. This will be one of the defining challenges of our generation. And the science is very clear. Our current approach is destroying the environment, driving climate change, and undermining the world's poorest people. Coronavirus has exposed the fragility in our food system and the markets and supply chains that drive it. As the UK Prime Minister said at the UN recently, once we move beyond the emergency phase, we owe it to future generations to build back better and base our recovery on solid foundations, including a fairer, greener, and more resilient global economy. This means helping hundreds of millions of farmers to secure better livelihoods, protecting and restoring the natural systems that sustain us, and ensuring nutritious and sustainable diets are within the reach of all. This is the vision for a just rural transition, which we set out last year at the UN Climate Action Summit. Changing the way in which we support agriculture is one of the key steps that governments need to take to realize this vision. Agriculture feeds the world, but is largely unsustainable. It drives at least 70% of natural ecosystem degradation. Governments currently provide over $700 billion annually in public support to agriculture, often creating incentives for harmful practices. Shifting this support towards sustainable livelihoods and the protection and restoration of nature is a critically important step that we all need to take. In England, we are developing a new environmental land management scheme, which will reward farmers for delivering public goods, such as protecting nature and biodiversity and restoring rural heritage. Now, we're considering measures to mitigate the impact of UK consumption on land and the environment in developing countries, following the report prepared on our behalf by the UK's Global Resource Initiative Task Force. It was encouraging to see many countries last year also pledge to take action. Now, the UK is working with the World Bank and other partners to provide support to developing countries to consider their own options to repurpose their agricultural support. We want to work with more countries committed to accelerating the shift to a sustainable food system and make a profound difference to the finance and incentives that shape nature, landscapes, and rural communities. This is an opportunity that we simply cannot afford to miss. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. Very, very wise words there from the Right Honourable Goldsmith, Lord Goldsmith, and we thank him very much and his team for putting that video together. Now, look, let's get on now with why this town hall is here. Let's get on with the science. And the Food and Land Use Coalition report, which was developed and launched last year, very much sets out the scene, why we are here, why it's important that we transform our food systems. And we're very lucky to have the editor of that report and one of the co-lead authors as well. Per Frederick Faro is involved very much involved with the Food and Land Use Coalition. He was seconded there for 1 year and actually is now very much working with the government of Norway. But in this context, just for this intervention, it's all about the coalition, its report, and very much setting the scene. So this is the only intervention that has a PowerPoint, so please bear with us. We thought it was important that some of these things came up graphically so we could all grasp the science. So very pleased to have Per Frederick on the line. He's given me a smile. So floor is yours, Per Frederick. Thank you.
Thank you so much, James. Not easy to add rhetoric after these two excellent speakers. I'll try to put some numbers on this for you. So I'm going to talk about the Growing Better report of the Food and Land Use Coalition. The essential exam question of that report was, can we at the same time deliver on the need to feed 9 billion people healthy diets, provide food security, preserve and protect our environment and our climate, and grow our rural economies? The answer to that question, luckily, is yes, but it won't be easy. This slide shows you why. What we have is a system in fundamental imbalance. On the left of the slide, you see the hidden costs of global food and land use systems today. Those numbers are in trillions of dollars. Those are numbers that are not so hard, not so easy to imagine. But what is clear is that the net cost, hidden cost of food and land use systems globally actually exceeds their contribution to global GDP. That obviously does not mean that we should stop producing food, but it does mean that there are costs to the system that are borne by people, by the environment, by our economies. And that needs to change because the system is fundamentally unsustainable. And as you can also see in the middle column, we are on the wrong pathway at the moment. The hidden costs are set to increase. These costs pertaining to health, to our climate, to the destruction of nature, to food loss and waste, and to underutilization of human capital are creating tragedy. And we need to address them. The Food and Land Use report tested two scenarios. One, current trends, which is the middle column, and one, better futures to the right, which is a radical reform scenario. And the good news, of course, is that the better future scenario sees a massive increase in success on all the four parameters I mentioned: healthy diets, robust rural growth, food security, and environmental sustainability. So what will it take to make that better scenario happen? The report outlines 10 critical transitions, and I cannot emphasize strongly enough that this is about a holistic reform agenda. This is not an a la carte menu. You can't do one of these and expect the result you want. Essentially what this does is breaking down the silos. No longer can we be an agricultural community, a health community, an environment community. We can't have an environment community broken down into climate people and the nature people. We need one holistic agenda, and that reform agenda is what is outlined in this pyramid. We start with better diets. Some of us will need to eat less meat. Most of us will need to eat less meat. We will all need a more diverse protein mix. We need more vegetables, more fruits, less salt, less sugar. We need to converge around a far healthier diet, a diet that is healthy for the planet and for people. Next level down is nature-based solutions. That means regenerative agriculture. It means no longer destroying nature, and it means a healthy and productive ocean. One step down from there again, we have wider choice and supply, which essentially has to do with diversifying what we produce, producing relatively more locally, and fighting food loss and waste. Then at the bottom of the pyramid, as fundamental as the others, is opportunity for all. This has to do with making digital solutions available for everyone, information available for everyone so that they can act on the evidence. It has to do with massive investments in infrastructure, especially in developing countries and emerging economies. That is digital infrastructure, it is transport infrastructure, and it's energy infrastructure, renewable, clean energy. All of these have to happen. Then we need to improve the lives and opportunities of women. education, health, access to finance. This is fundamental for success. If we do all these things, and it will take a very, very serious reform agenda, putting a price on carbon is just a start. If we do all these things, then a better future is possible. We can deliver a large part of the climate solutions. We can halt biodiversity loss. We can deliver better health, eliminate undernutrition, and half the disease burden associated with consuming too many calories and unhealthy food. We can boost income growth for the bottom 20% of rural populations, increase yields, and create over 120 million extra decent rural jobs. And lastly, we can improve food security. On this happy note, this rallying cry, I thank you for your attention and hand back to James. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Per Fredrik. Very good words. One of the key things that comes through to me on that is the holistic nature of how we have to solve these interrelated and complex problems. For years, we have been looking at things in silos. We have been looking at agriculture, and we've been looking at, okay, so what's happening with agriculture? And that's been the traditional preserve of dealing with food security. Environment, that's been something about looking at impacts, health as well. Nutrition, environment, nutrition, and farmers have tended to take the brunt of the outcomes that we're dealing with. So if the holistic approach is the answer, this therefore means that we need to get an inter-ministerial approach. We need to get political momentum at a very high level in governments. And this, I think, is a really nice segue into our next speaker, who is Dr. Agnes Kalibata, who since October last year, since World Food Day last year, since the Secretary General called for a UN Food Systems Summit, has in fact become the UN Food Systems, the special envoy for the Secretary General for the UN Food Systems Summit, which will be late in 2021. Agnes Kalibata, as I said before, is the ex-president of the Alliance for Green Revolution for Africa, and before that was the Minister of Agriculture and Livestock for Rwanda. So it is my great pleasure to introduce you to Agnes. Agnes, the floor is yours, and I'm wondering if you could just take us on a bit of a journey about why UNEA is so important for in the journey towards the Food Systems Summit and the role that UNEA can play in that, building that momentum. Floor is yours. Thank you.
To be unmuted. Hello.
Yep.
Can you hear me? Can you hear me? I need. Okay, good. Thank you, James. Let me just start by saying, James, that I'm still the president of AGRA, number one. Number two, let me also recognize what Paul and others were saying. I mean, it's really exciting to see us coming together. I worked at country level, and a lot of times we treat environment as environment, nutrition as nutrition, food as food. We never really, coming together as ministries has been one of the biggest challenges of our times. And I'm really happy that we are talking as one group today. But also we are talking during COVID times. And I just wanted to recognize that if there's anything that COVID has exposed, the fragility of our systems, the shakiness of our livelihoods, but also the vulnerability that we see among us, means that when we talk about building better, we can't just talk about building better as a slogan. We must build better because we don't have a choice when it comes to what we are doing. Now, here in Africa, from an environmental perspective, and across the world, we were already doing very badly, and you all know that. We are living from one disaster to another. When we are finishing the fall armyworm, we are going to the locusts, and we are going to increasing malaria cases. Now we are into floods and droughts every day. So our food systems is really at stake, and our environment is at stake. And probably one of the things that we haven't done extremely well, and one of the areas we need to look at together, is how well we are doing against the SDGs. Clearly, all this being off track is also reflected in our SDGs. We are off track on hunger, we are off track on nutrition, we are off track on environment. And the environment part suffers the most when we have stresses such as we have today in COVID, because across the world, people reaching out to the environment to find solutions is what we do. And that is reflected in the amount of land that we farm. When we are stressed, 30% of agricultural produce comes from increasing land under cultivation. And all this is impacting on the levels we are seeing on contribution on emissions and all that coming from the agriculture sector. So all these things are known to you all, and is part of why the Secretary General in last year called for the Food Systems Summit. And I want to recognize, because the minister said it, but I had also noted it earlier, the leadership coming from the government of Norway, where they have this Food Systems Action Plan that brings over 8 ministries together and really brings strong leadership from government. The Food Systems Summit will be looking for that. We'll be looking for strong leadership from governments, for political leadership to step forward and take action around what we need to be correcting. We'll be looking for leadership from private sector. We'll be looking for leadership from all of us. So I want to recognize that given where we are at today, the Food Systems Summit gives us an opportunity to work with you all, with UNEA coming on board, to work with all the other summits that are happening around this time, to make sure that we are taking critical actions coming from what you all are studying and building it in the Food Systems Summit and actions going forward. Because it's going to be very necessary, like I started saying, that we bring action together that recognizes that we all need to work together to save our environment. We all need to work together to save what is happening. We need to galvanize very ambitious action. We need to galvanize significant political action. And I just want to encourage you that and to invite you to be part of partnering with us to mobilize concrete action for the Food Systems Summit, so that the next 10 years could actually present a difference for SDGs and for our planet and people. So I want to thank you, and I want to extend that invitation to you all as we start the journey to the Food Systems Summit. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Agnes. Very wise words. As UNEP, we very much look forward to working with the Food Systems Summit and with your team to make sure that environment and the nature base of our food system very much are maintained and strengthened, and very much looking forward to working with you as well in the run-up to UNEA, making sure that we really embed the momentum for the Food Systems Summit within the Ministries of Environment of the world. So thank you very much for your intervention. I'd like now to move on to our next speaker, to Ms. Gerda Verburg, who is the Assistant Secretary General and coordinator of the Scaling Up Nutrition Movement based in Geneva. Before that, Ms. Verburg was Minister of Agriculture in the Netherlands, and in between these two roles, she was permanent representative to the Rome-based agencies. So that's IFAD, World Food Programme, and the Food and Agriculture Organization. And that's where Gerda and I interacted most when discussing and really starting to see how this food systems agenda started to take root in Rome, started to take root within the Rome-based agencies. So it's fantastic to have Gerda on the line. I'm wondering, Gerda, before you, just at the start of your intervention, you could tell us all a little bit more about what Scaling Up Nutrition, so the SUN movement is, And then maybe you can reflect a little bit about the connections between nutrition and environment, which is so crucial. Gerda, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, James, and good to see you, and thank you for the organization of this huge event, because it is the smart use of innovative approaches in a very sustainable way. I'm the coordinator of the Scaling Up Nutrition movement, a movement that is driven by 61 member countries, of which the governments have said, we want to improve nutrition, and we recognize that we need to do this in a multi-sectoral and a multi-stakeholder way. Because nutrition is important for the physical, but also for the cognitive development of people. Not only enough food, not the calories, but it's the quality of the food. And we want to bring the different players together. And that is what is happening. So in these 61 member countries, there is a nutrition business case, if you want, in which health, agriculture, education, social protection, economic development, finance, environment are all working together.
That's fine.
Having said this, I would like to make 5 remarks on this excellent topic. First of all, we know the global situation. We have the Eat Lancet report. We have the FODU report that was presented. We have the proposals of the Norwegian agenda about food systems. We have WWF. The challenge that is strengthened by COVID-19 is to get the basics right at country level. So I invite all global thinkers and all global players to turn around the perspective and take the perspective from a country lens. What needs to happen at country level and how to get the political and the economic information right and leadership right at country level. My second remark is that I totally agree with what the Honourable Lord Goldsmith has said. Let us make smart combination. Farmers now feel punished like they are the biggest polluters and the food they produce is not recognized as healthy food. And they say we are also blamed for malnutrition, be it undernutrition or overnutrition. So create win-wins. Farmers are proud to be stewards of the natural resources and reward them from delivering public goods and redirect subsidies for better use where everybody can be proud of and where society and nature, climate and environment and health can get the positive revenues. The third thing is we are very often talking about women, but we do not enough for women and girls. So my suggestion is, and based upon my own experience in the Sun movement, is put women and girls center in every policy you develop. What good is for women, what good is for girls, is healthy and prosperous for communities and societies. So that's my third remark. My fourth remark is, given the fact that you are so innovative here, and that in the next month or maybe next year, there will be at least 4 new global events. The Biodiversity COP, UNEA, you mentioned it. The Food System Summit, Nutrition for Growth. The Climate COP next year, the World Health Assembly. My plea is combine the agendas and take the bottom-up approach and focus on results and how to get results there from a country perspective. And then my final and fifth remark is we need new leadership. And leadership is not being proud of making a commitment of billion or trillions of dollars of investment. It's not good enough anymore. The new leadership is fostering the bottom-up approach, country-driven, people-owned, ready to serve and to support through collaboration. And finally, the new development way of working is capability development and get the systems right at country level. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Gerda. Brilliant comments. Thank you so much. Very proud of the fact that all of the speakers and absolutely you are talking about the holistic nature of food systems. This is absolutely key. If any way we're going to make progress. One of the key things I think that we have at UNEP is that we were wondering for years what our niche was. Well, our niche is basically to be the connector. There's nothing more connecting than environment. So we're already the nexus organization. And so we need to take the science from the nutrition organizations, from the World Health. We need to take the food, so from the specialized agencies, but we have to come together. And you've picked on 3 or 4 very, very important events that I think are very much going to be on the agenda of the Food Systems Summit, but how we can get that agenda moving at those particular global events, negotiations. So I'm very much looking forward to engaging you and the Scaling Up Nutrition movement going forward. So thank you very much for your intervention. One thing that Gerda talked about was the importance of farmers. And I know that because I know that Gerda grew up on a farm and that's her background. So it's very, very nice now that we're moving towards upstream in the supply chain. And I'm very honored that we have Sunny Verghese on the line, who is founder and CEO of Olam International, which is one of the largest vertically integrated commodity traders and producers in the world. And I'm very pleased to have him on personally because Olam has played such an important role in supporting our work with the Sustainable Rice Platform, which I personally started 10 years ago. So it's wonderful to have you online. It's wonderful to see your face. I'm wondering, Sunny, if you could talk about the importance of nature in your work at Olam, and specifically just tease out a couple of very nice examples that you have at Olam where strengthening the nature base of food production has been so important to your success. So over to you, Sunny, the floor is yours.
Thank you, James, and a warm hello from Singapore to all of you today. The COVID pandemic, which is one of the worst crises that we have encountered in our lifetimes, we can take the excuse that we were surprised and the whole world was surprised. We should have been better prepared, but clearly we were all surprised. But there's absolutely no excuse on the other 3 major developmental challenges that we don't have an effective response to those. So the first is the climate emergency, the second is the collapse of biodiversity, and the third is the widening social inequity. And all of this are directly impacting food and agricultural systems. We account for roughly 27 to 28% of all the world's greenhouse gas emissions. We just saw from the FOLU report that the cost of externalities in producing food that we consume is over $10 trillion. We have malnutrition in terms of both overnutrition and nutritional deficiencies, and 144 million children who are stunted and 50 million children who are wasted. So the global food and agricultural system is broken. So the fact that we came to 3 very consequential agreements, the Paris Accord, the UN SDGs in 2015 and 16, and even if you look at the Aichi Biodiversity Convention, the targets in the Aichi Biodiversity, we were supposed to meet at the end of 2020. There were 20 targets. We are going to at best meet 4 out of the 20 targets. On the UN SDGs, the interim SSDN report is that we are clearly well behind achieving the UN SDGs by 2030. And on climate, on the current path that we are on, we are not going to be anywhere near getting to 2 degrees, let alone 1.5 degrees. And there's a world apart difference between 1.5 and 2 degrees. So how do we bridge this divide or this gap between all of the fantastic miracles in coming together as 195 countries, etc., and signing all of these agreements, and which is why I keep saying the governments have delivered because they have signed the Paris Accord. They have come up with the UN SDGs. And we will see what happens at the Biodiversity Convention now. But they have done the job. But all of us, we have not done our job. And therefore, the gap between all of these policies and actions is really, action is not happening at the key levels. As individuals, we need to change. So let me give you a good example of how we can change individually. So at Olam, in my company now, we are alpha testing environmental footprinting calculator, which allows each individual employee, 500 people are now testing it and their households, which means about 1,800 people are now testing this app, which provides them a way to measure and mitigate their footprint, but also offers them clear footprinting solutions to change their lifestyle to become more sustainable. The second change that we have to have is in our companies. And James asked me to give you some examples of what we're doing. As a company, for example, in terms of improving water usage efficiencies in our upstream farming plantation operations, we attach now sensors to the almond orchard trees, the trees in the almond orchard, and we have been able, as a result, to improve water usage efficiencies by 20%. So there are a variety of programs that the company is embarked on, which will allow us to reduce our carbon footprint, our water footprint, and our waste footprint. The third is collaboration, and James referred to the Sustainable Rice Platform. It's a multi-stakeholder platform. There are 100 stakeholders who have come together. UNEP is part of it, the International Rice Research Institute, private sector, public sector, civil society. Rice is one of the world's largest crops. It is also the most polluting crop. We need to double rice production by 2050, which means we are going to emit another 300 billion kilograms of carbon dioxide. So this program, which now covers 5,000 farmers and expected to cover 1 million farmers by 2023, has increased rice yields by 10%, reduced carbon emissions by 50%, and reduced water use intensity by 20%. So this is an example of the third level of change of how we can come together to change. I think we are beyond frameworks and announcements and policies and signs. The fourth assessment report of IPCC was 2,500 scientists and experts. Took them 6 years, 130 countries they came from. The IPBES report on biodiversity, 50 countries, 250 experts. All of that is very clear to us. It's now all about bias for action and delivering on the ground as individuals, as companies, as sectors, as partnerships and collaborations with civil society and other stakeholders. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Sunny. Wonderful to hear your words. You know, Olam has been doing a lot of work that I have seen personally, obviously on the rice sector, but also with others as well. And very happy to have you on board, and very happy to have Olam and count on you as a partner. And we very much look forward, sorry to put you on the spot here, but we very much look forward to having you and your colleagues involved in the United Nations Environment Assembly in February next year in Nairobi. You're very welcome to come if we are allowed to travel by that stage, of course. So, karibu, Kenya. So what did we hear from Sunny? We heard the importance of the fact that we have the international commitments, but we're not meeting them. We've heard that we have the science, so we don't need more science, right? We have IPBES reports, we have the IPCC reports, we have the GEO6 reports, we have every other acronym you can imagine, the FOLU reports. We have a lot going on. The question is, how do we get to action? And your third point, Sunny, really talks about collaboration. And what I like about our next guest is that this is all about collaboration. It's about creating a forum for dialogue. It's about sharing. It's about making sure that nutritionists speak to farmers, farmers speak to policymakers, et cetera, So about the holistic approach, about creating momentum and bringing this kind of soft edge to a rather wicked complex problem. So I'm very proud, I'm very happy to introduce Dr. Gunhild Stordalen, who is the founder and executive chair of the EAT Foundation. And every year they have something called the EAT Forum in Stockholm. I've been to a couple. And it's like I said before, it's a very involving, very safe place where everybody can talk, where you have policymakers, UN, civil society, business, all talking about the need for collective action. So Gunhild, welcome. I'd love it if you could explain to us a little bit more about the EAT Forum and why nature is so important to the transformation of the food system. The floor is yours. Over to Oslo. Thank you.
Thank you. So I would like to start by quoting the Secretary General of the World Health Organization, Dr. Tedros. The pandemic is a reminder of the intimate and delicate relationship between people and planet. Any efforts to make our world safer are doomed to fail unless they address the critical interface between people and pathogens and the existential threat of climate change that is making our Earth less habitable. The broken food system is both the primary cause and the victim of the pandemic. Food and agriculture as the #1 driver of habitat loss, causing virus spillovers from animals to humans, and climate change making it worse. On the other hand, malnutrition, especially obesity and diet-related conditions such as metabolic syndrome and diabetes, making the pandemic more deadly and much more costly for society. And on top of that, disrupted supply chains, loss of livelihoods, entrenched poverty and inequality, driving acute food insecurity, and literally a looming food crisis. So I think we have a really critical framing now on the resilient, healthy recovery from Corona. Building sustainable, equitable, and healthy food systems within planetary boundaries that safeguard natural wildlife habitats and a stable climate, while at the same time providing healthy, nutritious, affordable food for all. So, what do we need to do? First and foremost, we need to listen to and we need to act on the best available science, just like we now are doing on the pandemic responses. Second, we need to come together like never before as a global community, and we have to work together across sectors, disciplines, and borders. And third, we need to come up with a plan. A plan, because failing to plan is planning to fail. We need a plan for how we will, during this decade, make peace with nature, make peace with planet Earth, and through that, open the possibility of peace amongst mankind. Obviously, no one person can devise this plan. It can only emerge through collaboration. But let me offer my own thoughts, at least a few broad indicative directions. First, we need to change what and how we produce food across land and ocean. We need to shift towards regenerative, waste-minimizing, carbon-absorbing practices. And we need to prioritize the production of healthy, nutritious foods. And we need to make healthy food available and affordable to everybody, everywhere. And we have to do all of this on existing agricultural land to protect the remaining ecosystems, which means half the Earth, no further land expansion. And this will require leadership. It will require governments to step up, international collaboration, and last but not least, comprehensive policy reforms. From looking at agricultural subsidies, fisheries subsidies to policies, regulations, and public sector instruments on the demand side of the equation. And also, as importantly, we need to shift financial flows away from today's practices, unhealthy, unsustainable, and inequitable. And we need to translate the case for transformation into compelling economic terms. And here I hope our recently launched Food Systems Economics Commission will provide new evidence and analytics, and perhaps most important, a new language to impress upon economic decision makers, policy makers, that business as usual is simply not workable in the Anthropocene. It's too risky, way too risky. And as important, that the opportunities of the future lie in transforming the food system. Then we need a flurry of vibrant partnerships across a wide range of actors with combined stake, power, and commitment to drive systems change. From small farmers and fisher folks to private companies, startups, food techs, cities, chefs, health professionals, doctors like myself, faith communities, youth, influencers, and so on. And finally, we have to provide people everywhere, as citizens, voters, and consumers, with the tools they need to demand change from policymakers and business, and also to make informed everyday food choices for those who have a choice. The peace plan itself needs to be available and accessible to all so that people are empowered to act. These are just some elements of a plan. Much more work is obviously needed, but the plan, or such a plan, should be on the table by the time of next year's Food Systems Summit. And we in EAT, we stand ready at your service to do everything in our power to help flesh out such a plan and make it a global force for change. And the UN Environment Assembly can obviously play a key role here in building momentum. And also, we hope that our digital convening this coming fall, Eat at Home, which is the replacement for the physical Stockholm Food Forum, we hope that Eat at Home will be an important contribution. So stay tuned. We will share more information on how you can get involved. And we hope that you will join us and make that rock. And we are totally convinced that if we can come together around a concerted agenda for transforming our broken food systems, there is still time for planet Earth to heal. Lastly, if we could decide that now is the time to make peace rather than wage war on our only home, our only lifeline, the year that COVID-19 struck could still go down in history as the moment humanity finally woke up and grew up. That is up to all of us. Thank you.
Thank you so very much, Gunhild. Fantastic words and a real call to action for us. I've been trying to deal with the issue of food systems for many years, and it can sometimes become so complex you don't know where to start. But actually, if we can get this very much this collaborative approach with all the right people around the table, whether it be at the local level, national level, and specifically now we've got an opportunity in the coming 18 months on the international level, then I think we're in a good place. So thank you so much. And I really like this idea that UNEA is going to perform a very important stepping stone to all the other important events that are going to happen in the environmental global political agenda next year. This year was supposed to be the super year for nature. Of course, it still is. But of course, next year, this in fact will be when all the more important events will come. So I look very much forward to working with the EAT Foundation and the EAT Forum. I'm looking forward to taking part in the Eat at Home in autumn of this year. Okay, so that really wraps up the first section of the town hall. This first section was really about assessing the scene, looking at the politics, looking at what businesses are doing. And I think there are several key things that have come out of this. The first one is that what looks very negative now, so we can easily say, you know, look, food systems are failing farmers, food systems are failing nutrition and our health, and food systems are failing the environment. However, these negatives can be switched to positives. We need to look at how do we produce food in a restorative and a regenerative manner. How do we create and enable diets to be more diverse, healthier, more available to people, no matter what socioeconomic conditions in which they live? And then the third one, make farmers part of the solution, not part of the problem. And then I think what has come out, I think, clearly from all of the speakers is that while we know the science, what we're not getting is the framework for action, is how do we do that? And that's something that UNEP, we are very passionate about. We're trying to work on it. We produced a document last year called the Collaborative Framework for Food Systems Transformation, which was a stepwise approach to help governments at the local and the national level to see how they can start moving forward on this in a very practical sense. So I'd like to extend my thanks to all of the speakers for the first half of this town hall. It's been very inspiring. I hope it's inspired all the audience and participants as well. So why don't I pass the floor back to Oslo, where Birgit will hopefully take us through some of the polls and update us on some of the chat around the town hall itself. Thanks very much. Over to you.
Thank you so much. And as we heard from Gunhild and from several of you, collaboration is key. I think it was more than I who got goosebumps and really felt the call to action from Gunhild's speech. We are starting with the first poll, asking, is food system transformation on the agenda in your region and community? And of course, here we could look into the reducing the environmental footprint of how the way food is produced, long-term food security, producing more nutritious food, more plant-based diets, and reduction of food waste. And what we asked people to reply on was whether it was, yes, very much at a high level with collaboration across all relevant stakeholder groups and ministries, which we really need. And only 8% of the audience actually typed that in. Then 62% report that they feel it's somewhat on the agenda, but with a fragmented approach to a coordinated action, which is really critical when looking at this obvious need for strong, thorough collaboration. And then 30%, it's a quite high number, report that it's not at all on the agenda. Policies are developed and implemented in silos. So this is an important work to be done, and the results from the audience are quite clear. In our second poll, we asked the audience if your community and region, what is the most important step that can be taken to strengthen the role of nature in ensuring food security? And let's start with the poll result that got the least replies. 9% comments that the public and private commitment to deforestation-free food supply chains. Then 41% reports the most important step is public and private support to shift to sustainable farming. And then we see 50%, half the people on board following and joining the poll today reports that you need more public education, more awareness on consuming food in a more diverse, healthy, and less wasteful way. So again, also, I think very clear signals back to the organizers and the global community. On the third part, we bring the poll back to you and I and what we should and can do. How are you committed to take action to transform the food system? And we see that 15% report they're inspired to start a new initiative, campaign, or startup. As an entrepreneur myself, I would wish to see that number being higher. I think this is really a huge opportunity for anyone to also work from the grassroots and collaborate. Then we have 25% of the audience reporting they're already working on initiatives to transform and revitalize our food systems, which is great. And then we see that a high number of 60% are working on a personal level, making behavioral and dietary changes, reducing food waste, and growing your own food. So that is good, but let's see these numbers growing even further. So these were the poll results, and we will now hear back from our town hall moderator. The stage is yours, James.
Thank you very much, Birgit. Look, according to me, I found that poll, especially the first one, quite positive, actually. You would say that 68% actually then of people feel that there is some activity or momentum within their region or community or country towards a more sustainable food system. So in fact, actually, if we're almost 2/3 there, now what's concerning, I suppose, is the classic one, is that the second question says yes, somewhat, but not in a way that's really connected. And I think that shows the complexity and the issues that we have when it comes to deal with such a wicked problem as systemic change and transformation of our food systems. So we now lead on to the second half, and the second half, unbelievably, we've all kept to the time, means we have a really substantial amount of time for our panelists to really get into the nitty-gritty of why it's so important to transform our food systems, and critically the role of nature. And it's very interesting as well. We understand it, and we take the second poll. The second poll talks about what are the important bits. So the important bits is, yes, we have to change our food production. Yes, we have to get more restorative and regenerative agriculture, whether it be agroecology, whatever. There are lots of elements there that we can build upon that are there to a certain extent. And then the last one, which is about changing consumption of patterns. These are critical. So that for me really kind of breaks it down to our two real things that we have to push on when it comes to food and agriculture. So let us lead into the panel. So the panel that we have assembled is made up of four people. We have João Campari, who is the head of food for WWF. We have Diane Holdorf, who's the MD for Food and Nature at the World Business Council Sustainable Development. Then we have Felipe Vilela, who is the founder of a new company called ReNature, which is really about regenerative agriculture. And then lastly, but definitely not least, because Immaculate is going to be the person that sort of brings this into reality in Uganda, who is the regional advocacy manager for HIVOS, which is a Dutch NGO. And this is really about, okay, so we've heard kind of the political statements. We've heard the importance of political momentum. What can we do from a civil society point of view, from a business point of view, from a regenerative agriculture point of view, and finally from activity on the ground? What is being done, and how can this feed in to the policy debates that are going to happen in the run-up to UNEA, leading up to the Food Systems Summit next year? So, gosh, we have a lot of time, and this is fantastic. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to give the floor, first of all, to our first speaker, João Campari. João Campari is the global leader for WWF, so the World Wildlife Fund's food practice, where he leads the network's effort to enhance the sustainability of the global food system. João was with me and plenty of other people from the food systems community at UNEA 4, so he knows all about the processes that we have at UNEP and our Environment Assembly. João, first of all, I want to say thank you for getting up in the middle of the night. João is in Sao Paulo, I believe. So thank you very much. And I'd like to, first of all, give your insights, and then to maybe talk a little bit about the work that you're doing and why UNEA and why nature, of course, is so important to your work. Floor is yours, João.
James, thank you so much, and thanks for UNEP for organizing this delightful dialogue. I'm very pleased to be and honored to be here with you all today. Let me start just by saying that from all the previous speakers and what you said, James, so I'll quote you, is that the food system, the way it's currently structured, is failing people and is failing nature. But there is one caveat. We cannot fix the problem by saying no to food, like we're doing fossil fuels. So we need to work to transform agriculture so that it becomes part of the solution to the triple challenge of achieving food security, limiting climate change, and creating a safe operating space for nature, which is a lesson that we are learning from the current COVID pandemic. There are ways to do that. Let me outline a few. I'll be very brief. First, we do need to eliminate new deforestation and new conversions of natural systems from food supply chains. This should be a business imperative moving forward. It is super urgent for us to the second action point that we need to do, we need to manage the lands that are currently productive so that agriculture stays within planetary boundaries and we will very clearly articulate. We can do this, for example, by learning lessons in scaling up technologies from agroecology and regenerative agriculture. The important point is to move towards agricultural systems that deliver resilient landscapes at scale for people and for nature. Third, we need to understand the technical and financial potential to rehabilitate degraded soils to absorb the demand for nutrients and work with the financial sector to develop investable restoration models, perhaps on a pre-competitive basis for now, to ensure that the new model is functional until it becomes the norm. And why am I saying that? There are today about 2 billion hectares of lands that are degraded or degrading on the planet. And just to give you an idea, this is about the size of South America. And we keep converting more and more land to produce more and more. And this needs to stop. Restoration efforts need to be taken very, very seriously at scale, at the global level, and it needs to be well financed. Third, we need everyone to begin to realize that our diets matter, not only for our own health, but for planet. One way to address this is for countries to begin to reassess their national dietary guidelines so that they improve both. And use this new guidance, for example, not only to inform the public about what foods are healthier and more sustainable, but also use these new dietary guidelines as a policy tool to inform public procurement, for example, that source food to public sector services, such as schools, hospitals, businesses. Many countries use these procurements to stimulate particular sectors. The new dietary guidelines, for example, could be used as a stimulus package for small farmers to grow more variety of foods that are better aligned for human and planetary health. So let me stop there and go back to you, James. Over to you. Thank you.
Fantastic. Yes, of course. And WWF has a sort of it has very much its global advocacy work, and then it also has its work on the ground as well. And I know that WWF has done work, for example, in the UK on the what's it called? The Sustainable Living Plate, I think it was called, where a few years ago there was an analysis specifically looking at, okay, what makes up a sustainable plate? It was a precursor, I think, to the Eat Lancet kind of report where we started to see, actually, hang on, we need less protein. So that was great. And I'm looking forward to coming back to you to get more of those examples. But let me now go on to Diane Haldorf, who is the Managing Director of Food and Nature at the World Business Council for Sustainable Development, where she's been since 2018. Before that, when I interacted with Diane, was when she was head of Vice President, Chief Sustainability Officer for Kellogg's, for the Kellogg's company. So she also has a background in agricultural research. So Diane, from a World Business Council for Sustainable Development point of view, what are you doing to kind of strengthen nature within our food systems? If you can give me some very practical experiences and some examples, that would be fantastic. Over to you, Diane.
Hi, James. Thank you so much. And hello to everybody. It's great to be participating in this event today. And I was just amazed listening to all of the leading voices at the start, setting such an inspirational tone and outlining what the scope of the work is that we all need to be really collectively working on together. So exciting to be part of this panel and dig into it in further action-based conversation. Just a few quick points on what WBCSD is doing together with our more than 200 members and many partners, many of them, including UNEP and others who've spoken today, because it will take all of us working together on these issues. Last year, we published our CEO Guide to Food System Transformation. And this was a document that recognized that while there's work that has to be done across every sector of society to shift our food systems, there's work that business can get on with and take care of now, working together collectively at the global level and at the local level in partnerships with its value chains and the communities. That laid out 7 transition pathways and built very much on the science-based reports that came out in the past few years, indicating where we needed to move to shift our food systems to deliver for the SDGs, to address the urgent needs of climate, of nature, of inequity, and of nutrition and health. Coming into this year, that was all laid even more bare for urgency through COVID-19. COVID put a lens of focus onto what it will actually take to shift the food system and land use system for climate. What it meant to have such close proximity to nature and the easier transmission of virus through that closer proximity. This huge crisis that we're facing on hunger and nutrition because of how fragile our systems actually were. And then, of course, this remarkable focus on inequity that has come forward that everybody knew was there, but we're now seeing drive just such an urgent requirement for change. The work that we've been doing helps to address these issues. We have work underway for Agriculture 1.5. What will it take to shift our food system to be climate resilient? How can we help smallholders through that? Through financing mechanisms, together through our Global Agribusiness Alliance on smallholder livelihoods focus, and through the Sustainable Rice Landscapes Initiative that we work on together with many others here. We have work underway on nature action, what it means to create regenerative systems and create nature-based solutions through the work that businesses take with metrics and outcomes that are based on nature, science for nature. And then work through our project on Fresh on what it means to drive nutrition forward, healthier foods. And in fact, just 2 weeks ago, together with GAIN, we launched new commitments on nutrition with many of our leading member companies in partnership with others towards the Nutrition for Growth Summit, which now has also been delayed into next year. All of these are helping to lead really meaningful collective action into big events that will now all take place next year. And we have to think about how we knit them together. So that our Climate COP, UNEA, CBD, leading with the Food System Summit as well, help show work together across climate, nature, equity, and nutrition to deliver something that recognizes the essential nature of the food systems that we lead and how we do these pieces, each in our own role, but only through collective action, actually accomplishing that transformation that we now need and see. Thank you, James. Looking forward to the conversation. Back over to you.
Thank you so much, Diane. Of course, WBCSD has leading companies that are really the tip of the spear, if you like, when it comes to driving innovation, driving transformation. But of course, the private sector can't do this alone. They're looking, I think, and this is something that from my side, who I used to be in the private sector, and now, of course, I'm in the intergovernmental UN space, is that I'm seeing there is a disconnect between what's happening, or the will, and sometimes the ambition, actually, at the private sector level, with also the lack of sometimes political will and lack of ambition at the public sector level. So this is something that we really have to bridge. And very nicely, you talked about the importance of next year and how we can start to bridge that gap. Now, let me move on to our second Brazilian guest, to Felipe, who is either in Sao Paulo or Rio. I think it's Rio because you're by the beach. Thank you again for waking up early or not going to bed, which happened with you, to really talk about what net positive agriculture or net positive food systems means to you in a practical manner. Now, you've started something called Renature, which is you've been an entrepreneurial figure in Brazil for 8 years. You were a champion, a UNEP champion of the earth, young champion of the earth, I think a few years ago. Maybe you can take us through your opinion on whether food systems can be net positive, which I think is a very different kind of concept than saying we need to reduce our impact. We need to improve our environmental footprint. It's about saying instead of it being extractive, it's going to put back, it's going to be net positive, it's going to restore, it's going to regenerate. Maybe you can take me through a few examples of that, but welcome, and the floor is yours.
Perfect. Thank you so much, James, for the invitation. It's a pleasure to be here. So hello, everyone. My name is Felipe Vilela from Brazil, the founder of Renature. It's a Dutch organization working on scaling regenerative agriculture worldwide. Our mission is to regenerate 1 million hectares of land by 2030 and also empower over 10 million farmers transitioning their agricultural systems. I come from a large-scale organic agricultural family, so I have always been passionate about nature-inclusive farming systems, but that are commercially viable, and it can also regenerate soil and biodiversity. 10 years ago, I went to the Amazon rainforest in Brazil to visit a farmer, and on the way back, I saw this massive deforestation for industrial agribusiness commodities, and that have impacted me big time. I question myself if there was any other way of producing major commodities industries need in a regenerative and environmental friendly way. Since then, I went on a journey to search for the highest experts, scientists, and farmers working globally in the field of regenerative agriculture to make sure that we can design economically viable systems to support corporates willing to transition their agricultural systems. And that's how Renature was born. But what does it mean, regenerative agriculture? Well, it's an agricultural system that is designed to mimic nature's processes to produce crops more efficiently. Its principles are to first, always keep the soil covered to store carbon in soil. 2, increase crop diversity. 3, ensure farmers' food security. 4, knowledge exchange, because it is knowledge intensive. And 5, ensure economical viability. In the end, it's all about financial risk mitigation. It's about avoiding land degradation. It's about loss of biodiversity, expensive agrochemical inputs, water shortage, and climate volatility. That way, we can create a self-sufficient, resilient agriculture system that provides farmers with food security, economic resilience, and healthy ecosystems. Now we are creating a portfolio of successful, commercially viable regenerative agriculture showcases for each targeted commodity that's causing most deforestation worldwide, like palm oil, cattle, soy, cocoa, coffee, cotton, timber. And the aim is to invite the private sector and policymakers to start investing and adopting such practices at scale. Companies like Danone, Lush, Nespresso, Timberland, General Mills, Kering, and others are already investing in it. We are now most active in emerging markets like Latin America, mainly Brazil, Africa, and Southeast Asia. However, we're receiving over 150 plus projects of farmers per year coming from all over the globe demanding transition. Therefore, we're planning to create a marketplace to connect brands interested in sourcing regenerative products to farmers that are producing regeneratively so that we can bridge the supply to the off-takers. One of our key SDGs is the partnership for the goals. And that's why we design a diversified regenerative farming systems where you can supply 2 different commodities to 2 different corporates. And what does that mean? An example of this is Natura, the big cosmetics in Brazil. They planted cocoa shaded by palm oil. They only need palm oil for their products, but by combining cocoa with it, they reduced the amount of pest and disease in palm, the input cost, and generated more revenue per hectare by supplying another company with cocoa. Diversification between crops can change many perspectives of landscape designing, and it can benefit corporates willing to invest in transition. It's time for nature to show its intelligence inside farming. Let's together make regenerative agriculture worldwide. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Felipe. Absolutely. Let's make regenerative agriculture mainstream. Or did you say worldwide? I didn't quite catch the last word. But let's make it mainstream, right? And I mean, one of the things that in my own background, you know, when I was involved in farming myself, someone came to me and they said, James, I want to talk to you about biodiversity. And I said, what do you mean biodiversity? What's biodiversity? And he said, it's all the living things around you. And I was like, what? I don't really understand that. Because at that time, what I was doing was that I was instructing tractor drivers, et cetera, to spray when they saw an infestation of pests. So I've also gone on a personal journey myself through this idea of, okay, farming in a very conventional, pro-chemical manner, to somebody who understands that we need an integrated management system when it comes to farming, when it comes to agriculture. The other thing I think that's so important is that we're starting to see now the connectivity between regenerative agriculture and the role that consumption can have, and the consumption that we can have, and the role that consumption has in shaping also to benefit from more diverse production, but also giving different markets and helping shape those. And I myself have personal anecdotes where I have friends who are in fact growing arable systems which are now zero tillage, they're increasing soil biodiversity, and they're actually making much better yields, increasing their resilience than they were before. So I think absolutely, Felipe, we're on the right track, and we have to push this, and we have to get this absolutely as a core issue of the political momentum running through the next 18 to 24 months. Okay, so thank you so much. And what I'd like to do now is I'd like to turn to Immaculate Daisy, who's the regional advocacy manager for HEVOS, which is a Dutch NGO. Now, HEVOS used to lead the One Planet Network Sustainable Food Systems Program, which is a UN-mandated public-private partnership, voluntary partnership to effect a transformation in our food systems. And I first met Immaculate in FAO in Rome, I think 2 or 3 years ago, where we were really trying to show that transformation of our food systems is happening, not at the scale that we need, but it can it does exist, and we have some wonderful examples of it. So, Immaculate, the floor is yours. Please talk about the experiences you've got in Uganda. Take us through some very positive experiences you have. Floor is yours. Thank you.
Me? Hello. Okay, can I be heard? Good, good. Thank you, James, for the wonderful introductions, and I'm pleased by the great panel and all the discussions that we know we've had for the last 1 hour until now. I would just like to start by saying nature is indeed the bedrock for indigenous as well as rural communities. They thrive and depend on nature and its resources, especially land, for their very existence, for food, agriculture, and more. What we see happening here in Uganda, like in many other countries, we've witnessed massive nature loss characterized by deforestation. We see a lot of degradation, wetland species extinction due to poaching, destruction of habitats, adverse effects of climate change, such as flooding. We see the prolonged dry spells, all of which are indeed affecting food and nutrition. And of course, this is as a result of for a long time, we see a lot of disrespect for nature, and nature is beginning to speak. We see rising water levels, and surrounding populations have experienced a lot of floods, and we see farmlands being swept off, and of course, foods lost, leading to food scarcities, which is really, really a sad reality. Wetlands and swamps, which used to act as sponges or sieves to clean up the water before it ends up in our water bodies, have now been destroyed by citizens, but as well as governments. We are looking at housing, industries, factories, as well as agriculture-related activities, which are not suitable for some of these areas to thrive where they shouldn't. And they've become dumpsters of all sorts of plastics, garbage, and related kind of impurities, which should not be in these habitats. Citizens, what we see on the ground, citizens are not allowed to utilize some of these spaces, for example, swamps and wetlands, which can actually be used for appropriate farming, like growing a few crops. They are not allowed, yet we see governments would rather give away these wetlands to investors. Through the Sustainable Dance Hall program that HIVOS has been implementing for the last years, we have done a lot of talking and convening a number of multi-sector engagements with ministries of trade, agriculture, ministries of health, to get them to appreciate and recognize a food systems thinking and approach to policy making, which has also resulted fruitfully to a review of a number of policies at both the national as well as the local level. But most of our successes can be talked about what's happening at the local levels, having to review policies using that food system, but also giving citizens back their agency to realize what power needs to, they need to take back power. I would like to end with just a few actions that are important. We want to see laws and policies work for all across the board, most importantly for nature, food and nation security, but also biodiversity. Financing for food systems is important. So we need to have national budgets put in some resources, financial resources in their national budgets, but also we need to transition to sustainable practices of food production, agriculture, fishing and forestry, which we have tried and tested, and we know these can indeed work, but also tap into experiences and traditional knowledge of citizens and smallholder farmers in conserving nature while ensuring household and local community food and nutrition security, which are the bedrock and key for indigenous and rural communities who are a majority in countries like Uganda, as well as low-income developing countries. Thank you so much for listening to me.
Immaculate, thank you. We will, I'm definitely going to come back with you to more about your experiences in Western Uganda, which I think are a wonderful example. What we will do now is pop over to Oslo. So, Birgit, could you, for example, give us a little bit of a flavor of the chat? Maybe there are some questions that we can move into our Q&A part and our discussion. So over to you. Thank you.
Thank you so much. And yes, we have had an amazing engagement in the audience here today. The questions are rolling in from all over the world, which is great. And I think we'll start with a question that kind of picks up on the last talk here. And while, of course, we have to find very big solutions for the entire world, very often it starts with good practice and good cases from the grassroots. So we have a question coming in to the speakers here asking, can you tell about cases where small local communities succeeded in taking control over their food system? For instance, independence and sustainability in the food production. How did they do it and how did that affect their economy and society?
Thank you so much. Why don't I now put you straight over to Immaculate, because that's kind of what my follow-up question was going to be. Immaculate, could you maybe talk a little bit about an experience that you have where the community or a local authority has really taken control of their food system and really started to look at nutritional and environmental and livelihood outcomes? And that's a question to you, Immaculate.
Thank you so much, James. I would like to delve directly to a community in southwestern Uganda in Kabarole district, where through the support of HIVOS and through one of our lead partners, we've been implementing a food lab project, which is a multi-stakeholder initiative that convenes different actors in their local food system. These are traders, these are producers, these are consumers, these are elected leaders, basically every actor in the food system. And they regularly meet as regulars on a monthly basis to discuss and identify their local food systems, their local food system issues. And together they've been able to come up with practical solutions. We've had smaller groups emerge out of the food lab called the Coalition of the Willing. They've had radio campaigns, they have community food fests every month at household level, where they hold food discussions, identify practical solutions to their local issues. And through this, they've been able to cause the review of the food and nutrition ordinance to have aspects of environment, but also consumption, recognizing the critical role of the informal food sector in feeding low-income groups, especially in urban settlements. So we've seen the review of this, of such policies. But most importantly, we are seeing the numbers of people, especially children affected with malnutrition, go down from a high number of 40%. We are waiting for the next census and household survey to take place. And then we shall see how the numbers are actually going down as a result of community engagement and involvement in the review of policies, but also recognizing that their own practices, their own attitudes, they need to change the way they eat, the way they grow, their perception towards their indigenous and traditional foods as key and important for environment, but also for food nutrition while preserving biodiversity. So that has been a good case in southwestern Uganda. Thank you so much.
Thank you. And bringing us then over to an area where we need to get a lot of more of the food and nutrition to feed the world. Let's look a little bit at the ocean. We have a question here coming in asking, how can we balance and link aquatic food production and agriculture and farming to create a sustainable chain of production? One option, for instance, is using waste from one as input for the other.
Thank you so much. So the question, it just cut out slightly. So the question is about the linkages between aquatic food production, correct, from the ocean. Yeah, that is, I think, something, Birgit, you could answer, right, as an oceans entrepreneur. But why don't I pass you over to João, João, I think this is a question for you. Often, and I can be quite guilty of this, sometimes my focus is almost always on the terrestrial ecosystems, but of course, food from the ocean is massively important. And this links in with the town hall we had yesterday on marine litter and the pressures that we have on ocean ecosystems and aquatic ecosystems. So maybe that can go to you, that those linkages between food systems transformation and the food we get from the sea.
Can you hear me? I think you can.
Yeah, we can hear you. Yeah.
Okay, thanks. Yeah, well, this is a super important question, especially because 93% of our fisheries today are fished to critical limits or worse. I mean, so it's an absolute crucial question, you know. But we need to rely also on aquaculture or improve aquaculture to reduce the cumulative impacts that protein production has on natural systems. So both we need to, get our acts together and harvest our fisheries to a sustainable level, and also rely on sustainable aquaculture to produce protein from fish. We also need, in my view, James, and to the audience that asked that question, to improve traceability in anything that comes from our waters. WWF with BCG Digital Ventures 2 years ago launched a traceability tool that is called OpenSC. And this is an open source for sustainable supply chains. I encourage everyone to go and look at it, because what WWF and BCG did with OpenSC is truly amazing, reducing the cost of traceability by relying on artificial intelligence. So I really would encourage everybody to take a look at that. Thank you.
And then we are moving over to a question that touches into a quite controversial topic in many societies. We know that from Gunhild's speech with Eat Foundation, they point at reducing the consumption of meat. And I think that's a topic that has both created much more people now cutting meat for environmental reasons rather than animal welfare. But we also know that it creates huge debates around the world in societies where there is a tradition for eating more meat. So one of the audience has sent in a question asking, is less meat the solution for the whole world? Food culture differs. Who would want to pick up on that?
Thank you so much. And yes, that is a very controversial topic. And one of that, I see Felipe waving his hand. So great, I'll pass it over. But for us at UNEP, of course, while we understand, of course, that these things are critical, it's but a part of a puzzle. But I'm sure Felipe will be able to give us more info. Over to you.
Perfect. Thank you, James. Yeah, so as a vegetarian, since I was born, I never tried meat and any kind of related animal products in my life. Although now I see the importance of, it's not about the cow, it's about the how. It's about how we manage the cattle and the landscape intervention, right? So now, for instance, we're working in Mato Grosso in Brazil, which is a high deforested area. Now there is a group of people, farmers, wanting to learn about how to include forest and nature inside the cattle ranching. And what's awesome about it is that we are using the silvopastoral systems, which is using tree lines to give shade to the cow for animal welfare improvement. And also using holistic grazing management from Alien Savory methodologies, so that you can use holistic management of cattle, so that they can rotate throughout the land and then start eating from piece to piece, so that it can regenerate soil and grow again, so that you can constantly feed the cattle with grass and not with grains, which is mostly the case in US in these confinement locations. And this is what gives the cows, a healthy environment to work on. Of course, we do need both. I'm not saying that it's, we should keep on eating beef, but know where it's coming from and know the source. Because if it's produced regeneratively, it is having a positive impact on the farm, and it's impressive the amount of carbon that you can actually store and sequester from the atmosphere into the soil based on these practices. In average, and regenerative agriculture with cattle ranching, it sequesters around 36 tons per hectare per year of carbon, while a conventional practice is around 10 to 12. So there is a huge benefit of having an environmental friendly way of integrating cattle into the forest and the nature. So as a vegetarian myself, since I was born, I see there is a need for both, right? So we do need to go, to decrease the amount of meat we eat, but also understand that it's about the how and not the cow, literally. So yeah, thank you, James.
Thank you very much, Felipe. So if I could make a conclusion about that intervention, not all meat is produced in the same way, and not everybody should reduce their meat. But if you look at the global trends, there are too many animals. Too much of the world's arable land is set aside to produce food for animals, not for humans. And of course, that also represents a very inefficient conversion rate to calories when it comes to natural resources, when it comes to land, water, etc. So context specific, I think, is the answer. Yes, globally we need to, but that doesn't mean that everybody needs to reduce their meat consumption in parts of the world where meat consumption simply isn't enough. Okay, so thank you very much, Oslo. Let's now have a little bit of a conversation, and I want to go to Diane. Diane, World Business Council for Sustainable Development does tons of work. You've touched upon its climate smart work. You've touched upon the finance work. You've touched upon FRESH. I'm wondering if you could talk to me and give some very, very concrete examples of where your organization and some of your member companies are taking some specific approaches to changing their production to more regenerative production. So over to you.
James, this is definitely something that we are seeing not just more discussion on, but more action on. There's a lot of different ways that people think about regenerative production. I think Felipe just gave some great examples that are quite concrete. We're taking that forward into many of the other types of agricultural production systems, working with members on diversification of crops, thinking about where crops should be grown based on water efficiency and soil health. Okay. We're working very specifically on how to expand beyond just the standard 5 grains, for example, into more nutritious varieties that can bring additional income for farmers. There's many of these types of practices that are then also beneficial for on-site agricultural production practices. So we're looking at how to expand the use of biologics, for example, rather than chemical inputs, how to be thinking through pollinator usage around the edges of fields. These are each individual steps that become quite farm specific, that can add up to multiple practices, shifting the ways that we support farmers in increasing biodiversity on their farms, increasing the diversity of the crops that they're growing, and then creating the market for not just the approval of those practices, but also increasing the market for the pull on those more diverse sets of crops into local and then also beneficially into the regional and global food production systems. So just a couple of very quick examples, James, of where we're working with members sharing those types of best practices, but equally bringing them to life at a local level.
Thank you so much. And of course, again, this is this question that we have constantly and that we have to bring forward again. Let's bring us back into this context of UNEA, is that how do we make our food systems net positive rather than net negative? And I think all of the evidence we've shown and that we've seen here today means that that is a very possible thing. Now, we are really down to our last few minutes, and I'd like to do something. I'd like to ask you the same question, but I'd like to put you in each other's shoes, right? So I'd like to go to João, and I'd like to say, João, even though you represent the World Wildlife Fund, which is a civil society organization, I'd like to put you in the shoes of a business owner. And I'd like you to say, oh, okay, what is it that civil society should do to support your transition? So I want you to somehow put on a different hat and see how that works. And let's see how that goes through with all the other panelists too. Does that make sense?
It does make sense, and thanks for that creative question. Yeah, at WWF, James, I mean, we tend to take a nuanced view on things, an approach to the world in which we need to partner with others. So this exercise of putting ourselves into other sectors' shoes, we do it on a constant basis. To be able to articulate our own value proposition for our core business, which is to conserve nature, or for people actually, we need to understand what it means for the other sector. What value can we deliver to businesses? What value we can deliver to other civil society organizations? What value we deliver to governments? And the more we do this is an exercise on empathy. The more we advance our work. We are not in a world, and I think COVID pandemic is teaching us that we are not in a world where we can, be in our own corners. We need to leave our corners. We need to collaborate more. We need to create very creative partnerships to be able to succeed in our own missions. And I think businesses and governments and other civil society organizations are coming out of their shell and engaging in these productive dialogues like we're doing. The solution lies in collaboration and not in niches involved. Thank you.
I agree. Absolutely, I agree. Immaculate, can I sort of try to do this with you as well? So you are also a civil society person, really working on the ground in Uganda, but also looking at the region. What do you think business, how do you think business regionally can help you to break out of the current status quo and create transformation in local and national food systems in East Africa? Over to you, Immaculate.
Thank you so much, James. I think business, I would like to narrow it down to the private sector generally, looking at the role of transport, the whole processing business environment, what they need to do. We've had discussions with the Ministry of Trade already on how do we do trade for nutrition, trade for improved food systems. I think we need to initiate discussions with the business sector. How do we get them to prioritize and see the significant role they play in sustainable food systems? How do we get them to rethink their kind of practices, to move away from the normal business approaches, but to rethink their business models, to put food at the center? And of course, initiating these discussions with the private sector is the beginning of getting them to rethink their models. But largely, at the start of this looks into their kind of attitudes and practices, so that they also recognize, because what we see happening right now, most private sector are yet to recognize the central role they play in a sustainable food system. So I think initiating those discussions from the start, starting those discussions would be the first step to take the private sector across the region through the different entities within which they belong.
Immaculate. Very interesting. And just because we're after 2 hours where we felt we had so much time, we're now down to the last few minutes or literally a couple of minutes. If I could give 30 seconds to Felipe and then Diane, if you could close the session off. Felipe, where do you see government in this? What can government do very briefly to help support this mission that we're on to change our production to more regenerative systems?
Perfect. Thank you, James, for this question. Yeah, I see that there is a lot of need in inspiring like policymakers to see the benefits of adopting such practices. We see that in Brazil, there is a lot of subsidies, like for soybean farmers working with not very with conventional systems, and a way to to engage policymakers towards this transition is to show accurate showcases that proves the success in terms of not only environmental and social impact, but also the economical impact, so that they can see the reason why also to advocate to it and incorporate new strategies within their policy to make regenerative agriculture part of their scope. So I think the good examples, the successful cases with the major commodities that the industries are working with, it's a way to engage them to incorporate these systems and then bring that into a scale and a landscape level.
Thank you very much. Diane, floor is yours for about 30 seconds. I feel like a news anchor, just to leave us on some inspiring words, and then I'll wrap up, and then we'll go back to Oz.
Thanks, James. Just as business needs to work across its entire value chain, business needs government to work together across its ministries to create a very cohesive set of food policies that actually work together, that enable the right incentives and that enable the right policy frameworks for agriculture to truly be climate smart, nature positive, within that local system, nutritionally appropriate, and providing for equity to the workers throughout that system as well.
So, couldn't agree more. Thank you, Diane. Thank you, Immaculate. Thank you, João. Thank you, Felipe. Thank you both at the end for getting up early. Really inspiring words. Look, we have the science, we have the initiatives. What we're lacking really is this connectivity, I believe, at the policy level to bring this together. Now, at UNEP, we have several initiatives across the board, going from food waste reduction to collaboration around the One Planet Network Sustainable Food Systems Program, the ecosystem, the economics of ecosystems and biodiversity, so TEEB, which is looking at agriculture and food as well. We have work on landscapes, we have work on sustainable diets, we have agroecology, we have all sorts of things within UNEP. So we need these partnerships to be amplified by the people that we've had on this town hall, to really build momentum going up to UNEA, and onwards to the Food Systems Summit. I feel very blessed by having all these fantastic speakers, but I also feel very positive. If it is a wicked problem with complex solutions, however, the complexity starts to be sorted out and simplified through dialogue, through getting to constructive decisions across policy-making fora, but then also bringing in the multi-sector public and private and civil society stakeholders too. So thank you very much. I urge all of you that are listening and all of those speakers that we work together towards UNEA and that we make nature for food systems a very important sub-theme in the 5th United Nations Environment Assembly in February next year. Thank you very much, and over to Oslo.
And thank you, James, and thank you to all the experts gathered, contributing from all over the world, and not to mention the audience. It was great to have so many people joining today, taking part in the discussion following the live streams. Of course, collaboration is key. Ecosystem is really coming in now in the society, business, governmental sector. We're actually moving back to learning from nature and how nature has created its amazing solutions and ecosystems. We hope that you have gained constructive tools and perspectives on how to contribute from your side, whether you're a high-level expert or a fellow individual change maker or entrepreneur from the grassroots. We are so grateful for your participation and input, which will prepare both you and the key organizations involved to prepare and ensure a more successful UNEA 5 and strengthened actions for nature to achieve the Sustainable Development Goals. It is now time for some closed meetings, but tomorrow we are back with a 5th town hall, which should optimally have been the first, as this is the Youth Voices for Nature. Last week, they organized an amazing virtual youth environment assembly with 1,300 registered participants from all around the world. They have a very clear message for us, which deserves and calls for our full attention and priority. It will be led by Eric Nuguna from FFF in Nairobi and Ane Serelli from Spire in Oslo. This town hall is really the one all of us should listen very attentively to. Youth Voices for Nature bring in the generation who much more than us has realized the criticality and the urgency of the work ahead. Our most important role and responsibility ahead is now to see ourselves as generation bridge builder. It is our duty to enable them to succeed in their quest as they unfortunately face the global role of generation cleanup. We must move from talk to real action. This is our time to act. Thank you from Oslo.